Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. This is a podcast where we explore how the best B2B sales leaders make the complex simple, drive relationships and revenue, and generally elevate the sales profession. In this podcast, we're bringing together sales experts, thought leaders, top account executives, buyers, industry insiders, all to share their experiences and best practices for navigating the complex sales cycle. So whether you're a seasoned sales professional, a sales leader, or just starting out, you're going to find practical insights and actionable advice that you can apply to your own sales journey. Plus, we have a bit of fun. Grab a coffee, get the earbuds in, start up that car wherever you are. Get ready, because today we're joined by Des McCluskey. Des is managing partner at Padeda Sales Consulting and an expert in sales enablement, strategy, playbooks, and change management. He's helped organizations transform their sales teams by focusing on the frontline sales leadership and long-term behavior change. So we're diving into the biggest challenges in sales today, from account management to the impact of technology, and why sales managers are the key leverage point in driving success. So lace them up, take a sip, buckle up, and let's get going. This is going to be a great one. Des, welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. How the heck are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Good to see you, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to have you on today. Hey, before we get started, I just want to make sure I remind everybody out there, please do us a favor. Des McCluskey is on LinkedIn, DES McCluskey, McCluskey. Make sure that you're connecting with him. Also, make sure real quick that you like the episode, share the episode, do everything to help us boost the algorithms and get this out there. Des, one of the things that we got to start with, though, is where are you in the realm of sales today?
Yeah, so you'll notice from the accent I'm across the pond, so based out of the UK. Padeda, we're a small consultancy, a band of merry men that came together about 12 years ago, helping different clients with complex business-to-business sales. My speciality, I come from a medical devices background, so I was a former sales director at Johnson & Johnson. I complained at my first board meeting about the way that we teach our managers to coach isn't great. So my boss did what all great managers do, which is they gave me a development opportunity. And I liked doing that so much that I started the business with my partners, Dan and Pascal. And really my speciality is probably still medical device focused, but I do a lot of work across professional services and financial services, as you'd expect, living so close to London. And I'm really interested in the not just sales enablement of the seller, but particularly the first line sales leaders. I find that organizations spend a lot of money on their sellers, a huge amount of money on their leadership team. And I firmly believe your sales culture is driven by your first line sales leaders. So my slight preference is always around the role of the manager in all areas of complex business to business sales. So
yeah, let's drop back into a part of that story real quick that I really want to hear is tell me about how that came about when you said, hey, at Johnson & Johnson. So what was your role there at Johnson & Johnson when you say, hey, we're not getting any coaching and training, and then what project are you given and how do you go about it?
Yeah, so I was a sales manager, so a first line sales manager, and I interviewed and got the job to be the sales director. And so it was fresh in my mind that trigger point. I was promoted from within, so I was a seller that became a manager, and they sent us on a program around management fundamentals. And it's the same whether you were a finance manager, whether you're a sales manager, or whether you're a warehouse manager. You still went on a management course. And I didn't find it hugely relevant to a sales audience. I thought it was fine. It was standard, but there wasn't really enough for me to get my teeth into as a sales leader because of how measurable sales is. And you don't really have many issues around people turning up late or basic discipline issues as you would as a warehouse manager. A lot of it was around motivation. People are earning good bonuses. It was just different. So at my first board meeting, the boss of the business, a great guy called Chris Norman, he said, welcome to the team. What are your observations? Anything that you would change? And I said, yeah, the way that we train managers to coach is, I think I used the word appalling, which is probably a little bit punchy for your first meeting, probably a bit stronger than Chris was expecting. Chris has been around the block before, and don't come to him with a problem, come to him with a solution. So he gave me that challenge. I went away and spoke to a number of different organizations and looked at what we were doing and just decided to design our own coaching program for new sales managers. So we started that in our business, and then J&J asked me to run that across the UK. They've got 14 different businesses. Then we started to run that across Europe. So and that was it. And then following that, I tended to be the one who got the development opportunities. You know, the ones where you do twice as much work and don't get paid.
Yeah.
I got a couple of those. One of them was strategic account management. So representing the business on how we bring 14 different businesses together. So, and that's when I met a number of different vendors in strategic account management, and just thought, well, this is a fascinating way to live your life, going into different businesses and seeing how you can solve the puzzle of sales and sales management.
That's an awesome opportunity and an awesome learning ground. So you took that, and how long when did you start Padeda?
13 years ago. So
13 years ago.
I was sales director for about 5 years, and realized I just enjoyed doing the non-day job more than I enjoyed doing the day job. My partner, Dan, was already in this space. He'd worked for a couple of organizations, and was having a great time. So it just worked out well that it was the time to kind of jump, and I've talked about it for long enough. Now it was time to kind of do it myself. So yeah.
Well, congratulations on that, man. That's a tough leap to make, and I know you're making a huge impact across a bunch of sales teams. So you went into it a little bit, but tell me a little bit more in terms of like where your focus is in your sales team, in the sales teams that you're working with now. And then I have a very pointed question that I want to get to here in a little bit. But first, just give me kind of a broad overview of the types of sales teams. And you say you're working with a lot of sales managers. What industries? Where are you focused? That type of stuff.
Well, I suppose I started off 12, 13 years ago doing a lot of training. And that training would have been on the standard sales training. So sales communication. I then started to pivot more towards sales process. I was really interested in sales process, which made sense. I'd implemented a lot of sales process in strategic account management in particular. And I think over the last 3 to 4 years, a lot more work in the area of playbooks. So Americans, I'm sure, are very used to playbooks. In Europe, we're not so used to the playbook approach to sales enablement. And I think that's because of our sport. So we have Lionel Messi, for example, with soccer or football. It's always football. And he's a genius because he just does what he wants when he wants, and you kind of build a team around him. I was always struck watching a Super Bowl once where someone said Tom Brady was the greatest player because he executed the coach's plays. And I think you're far more used to a genius or a talented person operating within a set framework. And I always think that Europeans struggle to deal with plays or sales playbooks. So yeah, a lot of work recently around playbooks, particularly around sales messaging. So how do you execute the value proposition? What does that sound like? What do the best ones do? So they're my kind of pet projects at the moment, or the journey over the last few years.
That's fascinating. I've actually never heard that take versus the more structured how to run a play. I had a mentor once that was always telling me the height of flexibility is actually when you're operating within a playbook in your group, because everybody knows the plays, they know how to operate, you know, when you need to go outside them, et cetera. But I never really took that down to there's a cultural difference even in the way that kind of the Europeans think about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, whenever you say the word playbook to most Europeans, they're not exactly sure what you mean or how that might be different. So I would speak to most leaders in the US and they'd say, what are your plays or your strategies for the year? And they'd have them. You know, they'd say, right, we're going after these particular customers with this particular product focus, and we're gonna grow by a certain amount. I think European organizations are less sophisticated from a sales enablement perspective, and the idea of a playbook, they're not really sure what that would cover or how that could work in reality. So another example, I think, of us copying some of the best practices from a US perspective.
So you dive in. I mean, so you're helping people at all ranges of this. One, just to understand what the concept is, because I know you have clients in Europe and all over the world, and you're just telling me you're in Tennessee and you buying a big 10-gallon hat. So you must be helping people at all different phases of the strategy, implementation, execution of the playbook.
Yeah, I think where we like to specialize is that we believe we're really good at helping customers pick the smallest, easiest project. I think a lot of our clients are confused. There's so many things that they could focus on right now. There's an awful lot of enablement options there for them. So I think we're pretty good at very quickly speaking to the key people and helping them pick some simple but impactful methodologies. Then we've got a number of different partners that we work with. So intellectual property, technology, whatever it is, I think we're the broker of capability. And it depends on the scale and the size and the ambition and the budget usually of the client. But the bit that I think no matter what methodology or IP or technology we introduce, we always then stay involved. So weekly or bi-weekly, coaching the coach, this idea of the manager being the biggest point of fulcrum or the biggest point of pivot in an organization. So that's the bit I think we do. We are real practitioners. We like doing deal reviews. We like doing account reviews, demonstrating what good looks like. And then slowly but surely we step back. But, coach the coach, I think, is something that you and I have spoken about on a number of occasions. And really, it's the most effective way to drive enablement in the long term.
That's just a massive leverage point, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if you have the right people, it is such a massive leverage point. So let's dive in. And here's the pointed question. And it's, I want to give you some room to run on here, and I'll kind of ping some questions. But you're across organizations, you're across the world. You're focused on playbooks and enablement and coaching the coach. What are the top issues that you're seeing facing companies in the revenue function today in sales and marketing? Like, give me, if we could dive into three, we'll do it one at a time, but what do you think is really critical today? And then how are we helping people face it down?
Yes. Yeah, perfect. So I gave your question some thought in advance. And I think the three for me would be account management. No one's cracked that yet. The second one would be the use of tools and technology, not just from a sales side. I think from a buyer's side, we're starting to see some real impact of tools and technology from a buyer's perspective. So they would be they're the three things in that stand out from my perspective, and maybe give you some examples about how people are maybe taking some slightly different approaches to them. I think the first one at a sales level, there is no doubt in my mind that a lot of the new sophisticated invoicing and company procurement tools, things like Ariba, things like the back end of some of these ERP systems, it's adding a lot of time to verbal okay to the final PO and the ability to invoice. So particularly for my clients that are in the new or the customer acquisition space, if that's their main sales play, I'm finding a lot of them are saying what used to take 2 to 3 weeks. So we've got an economic buying influence, someone who has the authority to say yes and no. They've given you the verbal okay. They have very high levels of authority. And on any big ticket item, this could be a $20,000 invoice. It could be a $20 million invoice. It's taking a lot longer to go through the motions of getting you registered. And even if you are registered, getting these PO systems. And I'm hoping this is a temporary problem, as everyone, the customer buys this technology and they're just not used to how to use it yet. But at least 2 of my customers said that their verbal okay to PO is taking 6 weeks longer in 2024 compared to 2022 and 2023. So even, during COVID, where we knew that people might be out of the office, it might take a little bit longer. They're saying on average, it's taking 6 weeks longer. And that's on, those organizations have deal sizes of about 100 to 200K. So not huge. You'd expect it to be a little bit more efficient than that.
And are you chalking this up mainly to, there's a number of things you could chalk that up to, right? So just lack of ability to make a decision, lack of, consensus or desire for consensus on a decision? Or is it truly this end of the road? We have a decision, we want to get it started, and the systems to purchase are not working all that well.
Yeah, so part of it, I think, is the system. It's definitely not the fact they haven't got the right buying influences in to make the consensus, because this is a verbal okay from from the person with the authority. So we looked into the numbers, and it's definitely not the fact that you weren't speaking to the right person, which is always that never goes away. Okay, you think you're talking to the decision maker and find out it's a couple levels higher. This is acutely and definitely verbal okay has been there. And it's either a system that's taking too long, or there are more technical buying influences. So the information from the Challenger sale, what was the number? 5.8 or 8.5 buying influences now involved in an average sale. I do think there are more technical buying influences, low degree technical buying influences. They have no influence to be able to say yes or no, but they can definitely slow the process down, because the two or three of them that really just need to rubber stamp things. And often this is driven, in my experience, from the finance teams. Finance teams are getting bigger. There's a lot more people involved. And even economic buying influencers that decide, I'm going to jump on someone's head and get this because we know it's urgent. We know the business imperative. Even they're not able to speed them up that much. Yeah, it's the rise of the bureaucrat, I suppose. And I'm hoping it's a temporary thing, but it's definitely been a trend in the last 18 months to 2 years. And I think that causes a real challenge for the salespeople and the sales manager, who then has to forecast, when this is going to land.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree. I've never heard it explained the way you're explaining it. But if I look back at deals that we've run that on the larger side, and you start to look at, there's both the delay in signature, but then the delay in payment, those both things are happening. So that's been spreading out. And I've always just chalked it up to the more influencers, more technical buyers, like you said. And it does seem that like every single person in finance needs to have an eye or a checkbox on something. What I hadn't even thought of before is that this could be actually a system implementation thing, where you see more people are implementing higher level systems to the control, and they haven't really worked out all the kinks, how this is operating. That's fascinating. So how do you playbook that? I mean, other than add 6 weeks to every deal, I mean, how do you playbook that, and how do you help people get around that?
Yeah, so I suppose the playbook is less relevant there. That's more around managers and coaching. It's going back to the fundamentals, which is when you look at the top performers in these businesses that have these headwinds against them, what they're doing is they're more proactively speaking about the post-verbal okay process. I think we're used to saying, after you've made your decision, what happens next? And I think salespeople inbuilt, we're listening to the economic buyers. When they tell us the deal is done, we assume that's it. I think the top performers are being a little bit more forensic. Okay, great. Let's imagine we get there in 6 weeks' time. What exactly happens next? Oh, I hand you over to, who do you hand me over to? And I think a lot of buyers don't realize, even in their own organization, all the machinery, and it's the small people, it's the small cogs in the wheel. And I think top performers are going very broad, much, much earlier. So once bitten, twice shy. I think once you've had one of these challenges, you're hoping the question is, no, it's simple, but do you have an automated invoicing system? Who runs that? How easy are they to contact? Would they meet people like me? Just seeing if there's any red flags or any potential issues in that process, because it's we've always assumed it's part of the buying process, but for me, it really isn't. It's the purchase order number generation process, and it's like its own little sphere of confusion at the moment. As you say, I'm hoping that once systems like Ariba are more commonly used, hopefully it makes things quicker. But we're definitely in the lag period at the moment of that technology adoption.
Well, I've sold to government before, and I also have had I have a number of friends that they're high levels of organizations like Fortune 500 that sell into mainly to government. And that is something that in the government process has been baked in for years, right? And also like large sell into enterprise, but it seems like it's going down the chain, right? You just need to understand more and more and more to do it. And I think that ties in really well to your next point, which you talked about account management. So account management, if that's one of the things that's coming up continually, right? That to me is almost your handoff from how do we do this PO thing, right? And how do we get this across the board? And what is the map of the entire account to be able to hand that up onto a platter and account management? But what are some of the challenges that people are facing there today?
Yeah, the one thing I observe in the last 5 years around account management is everyone's changing everything every 18 months. Whether it's the people, the roles, the responsibilities, how we do it, which tells me that no one's cracked the code yet, I think, on reliable account management. I think we had a small lag post-COVID because the cost and complexity of change, I think, made people probably stick where they were. So I saw a number of account teams have very high retention rates, which was good for them to see. It was really hard for someone new to build rapport, so you tended to default to the people that you maybe had met face to face beforehand. But I'm still struck by the number of organizations who are still going back to something maybe they had 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a little bit of a cycle. We go back to it. I think the technology's helped. You and I have spoken about this on a number of occasions, but CRM systems for me were very focused on the funnel and the opportunity. One of the reasons I always liked Membrane was that the account management was, I think, really nicely done. You'd clearly followed people's flow, systems of work. And I think now if you look at account-based marketing, that's very much in vogue from most marketeers. I still think the challenge is, how do you drive the urgency in account management? I think if you're in an industry where the buying process complexity is on the lighter side, there are enough deals coming through that you get the ability to test, talk to them about your value proposition and do that. I think where organizations I see are struggling is if it's one contract or a limited number of contracts and it's a 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 year cycle, I think that's where they struggle to get the energy. And you know this from your own background, the easiest way to keep your manager happy, show them your account plan in November, make it all look fantastic, and then we forget about it for 12 months, hoping it goes in a drawer and then that's it. Be seen again. So that, I think, is the challenge. There's a big difference in buying process complexity for sure, I think, in account management. And some organizations have the seller responsible for the renewal, some don't. And so that tells me no one's got this thing figured out yet. They still really struggle to get their arms around it and resource it properly.
Well, I saw a fascinating post the other day on LinkedIn, and unfortunately the name slips my head, but it was a great post around, do we call it customer success or do we call it account management? And what's the actual difference? And he was like, he actually, it was a great post. And at the end of it, he said, forget the name, who cares, right? Your goal is to drive satisfaction and retention and upsell. So those 3 things, satisfaction, retention, and upsell revenue, like, I don't care what the name is, but there is a role in there and there's a part of your organization that has to do that. And it speaks to the point and the fact that, there's not many organizations that have figured this out really well. And to that account planning thing, like it always surprised me, always, where you'd go in and you'd have these wonderful meetings. What are your top 10 accounts? And then you'd create your PowerPoint on each one. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. And then it got thrown in the drawer, right? And so it's why I love our account growth technology, but because it makes it actionable. But what are some of the, like, you're helping people figure this out. What are some of the main, I guess, to the heart of the issue, what are some of the main KPIs and end results that you are pointing these playbooks towards? Like, what are people measuring in accounts that's really across industries that's really making a difference?
Yeah, you made me smile with customer success. So that resonates exactly with the conversation I've had very recently. And the way that we often talk about, particularly more in the technology side of customers, so more software sales, the idea of the funnel, so expanding the funnel. I think no matter what you do, as soon as you have a handshake between 2 people in your organization, there is a moment, there's an air gap potentially where expectations can be met or not met. So it depends on your industry and how focused you need the seller to be on the first funnel rather than the expand funnel. Obviously, the audience will be responsible for the whole funnel. And I do think where that's possible, where the bandwidth allows, that's definitely the way to do it. I suppose it's semi-enforced collaboration is the theme of the ones that I see do this well, whatever that looks like. So semi-enforced, there is no doubt that cross-functional teams provide better customer success. Whether it has a customer success person allocated to it doesn't matter. I think enforced collaboration that's cross-functional seems to work. I've seen a number of my customers, and again, I'm probably more at the complex end. So I'm less the kind of software annual renewal. This is more 3-year, 5-year, 7-year government contract type sell, where I've seen this work well. But they've actually put together retention squads led by a seller. Doesn't have to be even an account manager in that account. But this idea of bringing because we have a huge amount of energy in the funnel around opportunities. We always get around it. There's urgency. You need creativity. You need an action plan. Those action plans need to be accountable and actionable. What I'm seeing work well is on your top 5 or top 10 renewals, putting together a retention squad that is truly cross-functional. I mean, it doesn't sound that different, but I've seen it much more popular in the last probably 18 months, 2 years. That people are much more wary, I think, of those big ones that are too big to lose. And we know from account management, you've got the bow tie where there's a single contact between each organization, or you've got the diamond. And I think these retention squads create a bit of an agility that they're short term, so they're not permanent projects. The idea of the project team might change, but for me, they're bringing a bit of that Scrum mentality of agile, this idea that we're here for a temporary role together, and how can we move this deal forward? So it's helping them with the retention of the contract, and that's fine. But actually, I think they're getting they're finding out a huge number of new contacts to speak to. And that's probably the KPI for me, is however you define sponsors or strategic coaches or whatever language you like, I think there's no doubt you've got to go high and you've got to go wide. So any behavior or any rhythm you can get into your sales motions that make people have urgency and energy to reach out higher and reach out broader, I think they're never bad. They're never bad behaviors when you're looking after some of these large accounts that are too big to lose.
We do this thing in Membrane that I love, that you defined you use different words that we did, which you have that space. Anytime you do a potential handoff, there is that space, and closing down that space and ensuring that people, are around it and understand it. We use this metaphor of a baton, right? So getting things around the track, getting it around the track, but making sure that baton is passed appropriately throughout the organization, right, is a massive KPI that I don't think people have really grasped and understand. Like as a customer, and when you're a customer of an organization, you feel it when it's not, right? You absolutely. I went through a payroll implementation like 6 years ago. That was one of you could tell all they were doing was reading things out of their CRM. They had never talked to each other. And it was so painful. But that baton pass, that forced collaboration, it seems like these agile teams that you're talking about, one offers, you got to do that right. Like you would have to really focus and make sure that you're doing it right, and make sure that people know how to go broad and wide. How do you train that or playbook that, or make sure that people are on the same page?
Yeah, I think the playbook bit, whenever we design an account management playbook, I think people do get a little bit overawed with roles and responsibilities. So there's a temptation to HR policy this and say, you are responsible from this point to this point. I like the different approach, which is, what's the customer outcome? We need the customer renewal. And you don't need the roles and responsibilities once we leave the room. What you just need is someone who's able to coordinate a pragmatic and fast discussion about some key things. So any form of common language, most organizations have a bit of common language around the account or account management. It doesn't matter. I think use what you have. I think the key thing is the when. So what's our cadence? Who do we get in the room, and how often do we talk about it? And which person, usually not the most senior person, which person controls this conversation? So what's the agenda? Are we following it? Do we have a way of talking through this challenge in this problem? And the idea then, there are no such thing as a bad question. And it's not an inspection of the in-count team. I think that's the key thing, is we're all responsible for this. This is not us turning up and telling you. I think account managers, particularly from a sales perspective, feel the pressure of the entire organization. We've asked the question, we're not 100% of the answer. Well, Paul, you're closest to them, you must know. And sometimes that happens, but I think sellers feel that pressure more than I don't know is an acceptable answer. But I think the idea is, if you bring that pursuit team together with the right oversight for that particular call or for that meeting, then I think it works well. I don't think you need to spend hours and hours talking about HR policies and payments and all of these little things, because I think salespeople will find the quickest route between 2 points. So no matter what system you try and find, we'll find a way to find the shortcut, right? That's what we've always done. So yeah, that's how I think most people solve it.
Well, that ties into our third challenge. So let's talk about that, which is the technology. You were talking about technology and process, right? How do you? That seems to be something that there's so much technology out there these days. There's so many options for process. There's so many different things that people want to use in their sales teams that you're almost confusing the issue instead of helping the issue. How are you seeing that in market, and how are you helping people face it down?
Yeah, listening to you talk there, I think you've described that well. So I remember a TED talk a few years ago from a professor saying that in his local grocery store, there are now 8,500 possible combinations of salad dressing. So if you look at all the oils, all the vinegars, all of the mixed things, you put any of those together, you could have 8,500 possible combinations. And we've always thought that freedom is choice. We've always thought loads of things to choose from. It's the foundation of capitalism. Choice is freedom. I think choice is becoming paralyzing in our sector. Personally, you've got too many tools. What does the tool do? Who's it helping? They're bombarded. The people I speak to are absolutely bombarded with technology. There are certain 300-pound gorillas that most enterprise organizations would have. So they'll have a good CRM system. They'll have a good content management system, and they might have a learning management system. But and I understand that. But even within those platforms, there are hundreds of sweeties in the sweetie shop, and I think leaders are paralyzed by that. Sometimes this is driven from IT, in which case they're big unstoppable trains and you have to get on board. So I can understand people being dragged into those conversations, and they might just ask for our help. Oftentimes it's a manager that's trying to fix a relatively short-term issue and goes to IT and said, can I have this sweetie for my sweetie shop? And not everybody needs it, just me. And that's a job for life for people in IT, just trying to say no and drive consistency. Mm-hmm. I think before people look at any tools, and this is the definition of common sense, the tool should enable the process that you want to drive. The tool is purely an enabler to make it quicker, easier, more straightforward, and then to give you data at the back end. But I think if you haven't thought about the process, definitely don't go near a tool. Someone described it to me yesterday is instead of ready, aim, fire, it's ready, fire, aim. And I agree with that. But the bit that I think is often missing from people who guide sales leaders or have you join project teams is buying process complexity. I think there is a world of difference between fast-moving, low-value, large, complex funnel sales compared to high-value, low number of opportunities. And then there's the group that's kind of in between, or organizations that do a bit of both. And I think the mistake I see everyone make is that their friend who works in complex business-to-business sales uses this tool. They think it's great. Therefore, they think, well, it must apply to my team because my team will get the benefit from it. I would always proceed with caution and say, what was the buying process complexity that person has great success with? And I don't doubt that success. Is that really the environment that your team are existing in? And I've seen the same tool in low and high complexity environments, one time be unbelievably successful, the other time just complete square peg round hole, and just doesn't fit. So,
well, I completely agree. And I'm in that world every single day, which is, it's what we do. We provide that tool for that mid to high complexity sale, right? So to outline that process and understand it well. But there's an interesting thing is what you mentioned there is that, like, if you look at the VC community or a CEO community or those type of things where they're like, you know what, you're a part of our community. We highly recommended this tool regardless or whatever. And I've seen that just be disastrous for people. Like you don't rely on, the people that know the tools. You're relying on people with very limited expertise that just say, oh, we've used it before, use it again. And I have seen that crash and burn so many times. Do you run into that in market where you're just like, we have to use this because the VC is here and, it sits on the shelf and we pay for it, but it's very little. We don't use it really at all.
Yeah. I suppose I'd come at that from two different angles. So yes, I've been told from above from someone that either a non-exec or the VC that this is the tool, the technology. And their rationale is sound, which is you need to look like a proper scalable grown-up business. Therefore, we want you to use these tools from a visibility perspective. And that's where I see people completely miss the first line manager. So I think the first line manager can often be the litmus test of that. The other thing that I happen to have been involved in the last 2.5 years is I've had a couple of MDs that have joined VCs and they've asked me to go with them and talk to their different businesses. And that, again, I think is an interesting discussion because you'll see the VC say, we definitely need this. We have it in 2 or 3 of our other companies. And the way that I've been able to push back on that is by using the buying process complexity argument. So I think you're right. I think VCs very rarely look at that and they very rarely compare those two things. The other thing that they're obsessed with is forecast accuracy. So S&OP processes, which we get involved in at the sales end, actually, you do have to be careful about the maturity of the business. So virtually every diagnostic we run, we classify an organization in anything. So the sales process, the tools and technology, the enablement platforms, we typify them as random. So their maturity is random, everyone for themselves. Informal, which means it happens a bit, but it's not systematic. Formal, which means that it's happening regularly. And then dynamic is it's happening regularly, it's well enforced, and there's probably some kind of feedback loop, usually involving some level of technology. So I think if you're already in formal, I think the idea of some of these systems makes complete sense. Oftentimes I see people at the level of random, so they haven't even put their leaders in a room to agree what the focus is, and they go straight for, oh, great, let me plug this in at $500,000 a year. So I think it's right place, right time, buying process wise, but also in terms of the maturity of the organization. You can get fantastic results from very basic tools if the managers are sitting down and talking together about what they're going to do and what they're going to coach to and what they're going to enforce. Then I think it's really easy. They're desperate for a tool at that point because you've made them conscious of the fact that, hold on, I'm missing some data for this conversation. Perfect. Okay, well let's give you those tools.
And that frontline manager collaboration with the CEO, you miss that a lot. You miss that frontline manager leader collaboration with the CEO / VC layer about what we actually need and how we actually need to drive the business. Or you get the CEO VC layer saying, I know this, just do what I say. And that destroys a lot of business. So that getting them in the room, defining that sales process and understanding, what is our sales process? How are we going to activate? What is successful? What are we going to coach to? What are we going to manage to? And then driving a tool for that. Oh my gosh, I love working with organizations like that. I just, it's absolutely amazing. And then we actually try and force that in our sales process where we ask people, hey, what's your vision? What's your end goal and vision? What's the current state? What's the gap in between those things? How are you going to fill that with sales process? Do you want sales process? What type of product do you need for that? It makes all the difference in the world for success. Sorry, that was me rambling a little bit, but you hit on a topic, man, that is near and dear to my heart, and you are dead on with it. Absolutely dead on. So, hey, we've been chatting now for a while. I one of the things I do want to do is started rounding off. How do people connect with you, Des, if they're interested in hearing more about what you're doing with Padeda?
LinkedIn is definitely the best way to do it. So Des McCluskey is my name on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest and quickest way. People can see the kind of customers that we serve on there and go from that as a starting point. Again, really grateful for the chance to sit by the fire and have a chat with you. As ever, we're well aligned about some of the challenges from a sales perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And so LinkedIn is the best way. And you mentioned a couple partners. Should anybody connect with what were the partners?
Dan Donovan at Padeda and Pascal Hall at Padeda as well. So we're all as guilty as each other when it comes to running our projects.
Fantastic. And do you have the last question I have is, do you have any sort of that first meeting? Will you, if somebody reaches out to you, give a half hour, 60 minutes, like free conversation? Is that a strategy meeting? Is that how do you run that, people?
Yeah. So happy to chat to people and give some, as you say, some free consulting. We typically send a Calendly link so people can just book in. If you send me a link via LinkedIn, I'll send you a slot. You can pick half an hour or an hour. I'm happy to give an oversight of what we do. But I always find, I had 2 yesterday, you need to help someone in the smallest possible way. So that could be, I've got a meeting in 3 weeks. What would you do if you had this challenge to my MD? Might send you a resource or an example of something someone else has done, just some thought starters. And if that comes back in 6 months, 6 years, then I always think give a little, get a lot is the way that we've built our practice, really. So happy to help in any way we can.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Des. And audience, we got CEOs, we got VPs of sales, we got account executives, we got SDRs all listening. If you want to connect with Des, please go to LinkedIn and do that. And as he just said, bring a problem. And bring a problem that you're facing. He can help you solve that. That would be awesome. And we're going to sign off now. We're going to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the time spent with us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that stuff to help get this out to more people and elevate the sales profession, and keep shining bright. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. I hope today's conversation provided you with valuable insights and practical ideas to help you and your team elevate the profession and succeed in today's complex world. This podcast is brought to you by Membrane.com. Membrane is the B2B growth platform for CEOs, sales leaders, and sales executives who are committed to sustainable growth and change. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, like, subscribe, share it with your network. Your support really helps us bring more valuable insights from the best in the business straight to you. Also, check us out at Membrane.com. We're more than a technology. Membrane equips your teams with the expert coaches and trainers, amazing sales methodologies, process, people, and tools to continually improve and coach results. More than a CRM. It's a network, and it's designed to help your team execute with confidence, smash goals, and overall up your sales game. So we'll see you next time for another episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. And until then, as always, keep shining bright.